help us to receive your word. We pray that you would make us vessels. Amen. When I spoke with Hanson this week, he told me that you here, have been discussing what it means to face your enemies. And I liked that theme. I decided I could take it and you know, maybe even, if I was bold enough, add to it a little bit. And normally I would not turn to the Apostle Peter as an example for much of anything. Most of the time that he is with Jesus, as they're in this walk of faith together, Peter is constantly making mistakes. We know him for denying Christ. So often he fails to understand. He's left confused or misinterpreting. Sometimes he's looking for a loophole or a way out of an obligation. And on occasion, he thinks a little bit too much of himself. But in this instance, in this story, Peter actually, I think he makes a pretty good example. You see, Jesus, he just finished telling all of his disciples how they should forgive someone. He outlines for them 4 simple steps on how to confront somebody who has wronged you. What you need to do. He lays it out clear and simple. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do this. That's the right way of going about things. And Peter, on this occasion, the rare occasion that he is the wise student, says, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or my sister? Up to 7 times? Now, when you're first reading that like I did, if you're reading it in kind of our modern context, it might sound like just another time that Peter is looking for a loophole or looking, just how far do I have to push this whole forgiveness thing? Am I done after 7? Can I wash my hands up and say I've been, a good person now? 7 is enough. After that 8th time, it's done, right? But there's a little more to it than that. There's a key cultural bit of context that we have to keep in mind to understand that Peter actually is asking a good question. Because in that day and age, among that Hebrew, that Israelite context, 7 is a perfect number. There were 7 days of creation. 7 laws of Noah. The temple menorah, it had 7 branches. Priestly ordination, it lasted for 7 days. Sukkot, which is the festival of booths, when people would live in temporary shelters that they built, it lasted for 7 days. So Peter, he's not so much asking about the specific number of times that he has to forgive. Instead, he's starting to show a little bit of understanding. He's thinking 7 is a perfect number. Maybe we should be forgiving somebody the perfect amount. Yes, Jesus says, he turns to him, that's right. But there is more to it than that. Jesus says that forgiveness it's an obligation that goes beyond human understanding. Think of perfect forgiveness. That forgiveness to the 7th degree. And multiply it 1,000-fold. Think of that thing that you are absolutely unwilling to forgive somebody for. and be ready to forgive them for more. Imagine this. And that's when Jesus goes into his parable. Imagine this. You owe the IRS $80 million. That looks bad for you. I mean, I'm talking, tax evasion on like the grandest scale here. And like any reasonable person, your heart, it just dropped when you got that letter in the mail, that summons to court, because you knew there would be no way you could possibly in a million years ever pay this back. You show up and the judge says you have to pay. All of it, every single cent that is owed. And if you can't pay, we're taking the car. We're taking your house. We're taking all of your clothes. Maybe not the ones on your back, but yeah, we're going to take the doghouse too. It's gone. Your only defense, the only thing that you can muster when you're sitting there in front of that judgment seat is just give me a little bit of time. Please, I beg you. I beg you. You know that a little bit of time is not going to be enough. Even if by some miracle you could save $50,000 a year, a little bit of quick mental math would tell you that it would take you 1,600 years to pay it off. So the judge, in a rather surprising turn of events, bangs his gavel and says your debt is forgiven. Out of nowhere, forgiveness comes that simple and that cleanly, that suddenly. And you're free to go home. So that's what you do, right? Try to return to life. Make the best of this situation, but you get home, you pull your car into the garage, and you look at that empty space on your shelf where your weed whacker belongs, and you realize that your neighbor still has it and they haven't given it back. The nerve, right? So you pound over to their house and you grab them by the neck. They owe you. They've had it for years now. And every time you bring it up, they just shrug it off. That's the level of absurdity in this parable. This parable that Jesus tells to remind us that we have to be able to forgive on a grander scale than we thought possible when we so often struggle with forgiving even the littlest things. Jesus is reminding us that anything less than paying that radical forgiveness forward is hypocrisy. Because everybody wants to believe that we're entitled to every benefit of grace. Everybody wants to get off scot-free. Because it would be great if we didn't have any consequences to our actions. And yet we're greedy, we're vindictive when it comes to the punishment of others. We say, I learned my lesson. I have borne the guilt and the shame. I know what it feels like to be wrong, and I promise I will never make that mistake again. Please, just forgive me. And all the while we insist that others must pay their debt to society. They must make things right before they earn their forgiveness. But that doesn't sound much like forgiveness, does it? The king in the story of the wicked servant is not concerned with a punitive sort of justice, a twisted and a vengeful balancing of the scales. Instead, he strives for a very restorative justice. A mercy that renews relationships and opens the door to the possibility of a collaborative future. We all know that there are very grievous wrongs in this world that cannot be righted. There are people in our lives that we wish would be swallowed up like the Pharaoh in the Dead Sea. There are debts which cannot and will not ever be paid. That unforgiving servant owed 10,000 silver coins. It's as unpayable as us owing 80 million. But money in the story, it's just a stand-in. It's an easy thing to talk about because it's something we all have some experience with, being owed or borrowed. It's measurable, it's quantifiable. But we know that not every debt is that simple. Not every debt is the same. Some can't be paid in the way we want or the way we expect. And like I said, some cannot be paid at all. Anytime someone wrongs us, anytime someone hurts us, we determine that someone else, they are our enemy because they have slighted us. And I think we're prone to demanding some sort of recompense for every injustice in our lives. When I was in the 6th grade, a kid at my school killed my best friend. I remember believing that killer, that other kid, that he owed me something. That he had a debt to pay for the life that he took. The courts, they found him innocent. It was an accident. But I had no room for forgiveness. I believe that anybody who was foolish enough to play with a gun couldn't be innocent. Somebody that didn't know how to treat it with respect and be safe about it. How could that person be innocent when they were responsible for my friend's death? He owed me. He owed me, I don't know, something. He owed me time in jail. He owed me for the jokes I would never hear my friend tell again. For the time I would never spend with him. But I received nothing. No vindication, no payment, and no apology. And even if I had, I would not have my friend back. no jail time and no words, no amount of money would fix the problem. It's a debt that could not be paid. I know that all of you have someone in your life who has wronged you. Someone that you believe owes you an apology. And I would be willing to bet that the majority of us, we bear that grudge silently. We're holding out for them to make the first move, right? Well, if you want to be an imitator of Christ, if you want to be like the king in this parable, then it is time to settle your accounts. Take action and wipe the ledger clean. I know, there is that little voice inside of you who, even though most of you might know it's a good idea to offer that forgiveness, says, but wait, no, you don't know how bad that person is. They don't deserve it. But who are we to decide who deserves it? And honestly, is it really anything worse than what we've done to someone else? Have you never been ashamed or treated someone wrong? All of us, we have had innumerable debts to an innumerable amount of people. And for every one of those, we have been accountable to God. But through Jesus Christ, God paid our debt. And God paid the debt of our neighbor. And God paid the debt of our enemy. So then how are you going to hold it against them? Peter asked Jesus, Lord, are we supposed to forgive someone? Are we supposed to forgive someone perfectly? Are we supposed to forgive someone 7 times? And Jesus said, yes. That and so much more. Amen.